Wow, I really didn't think this was going to continue on so long, but here we are. 2 weeks ago, President Trump started a Twitter beef with the Pope? Okay. Before this gets to meet me in Temecula territory, let's walk through from the beginning. And before we start, I'll remind you that President Trump is currently fumbling a war in Iran, hiding the Epstein files, and trying to prevent free and fair elections for midterms. This is a really good use of his time. I'm Shane, and this is Mundangerous Thoughts. Okay, so this all goes back to April 4th, when Hegseth said something kind of unhinged. He said U.S. troops are fighting for Jesus. The Pope obviously said that's not the case. Totally normal thing for the leader of the Department of Defense to say in a country with a separation of church and state. No concerns here. Then on Easter Sunday, we got this insane truth from President Trump. Open the fucking straits, you crazy bastards. He's on his Sigma male grind set. Even Easter, the holiest day of the Christian calendar, won't stop him from threatening war crimes, cussing out foreign leaders, and, oh, did you see that in there? Blaspheming the religion of our regional allies. Cool. Then, as the deadline approached, we got this truth, which a whole civilization will die tonight. And of course, the Pope responded to this, saying, "Today, as we all know, there was this threat against the entire people of Iran, and this is truly unacceptable." He also said, "There are certainly issues here of international law, but even more than that, it is a moral question for the good of the world's people. I would invite citizens of all countries involved to contact the authorities, political leaders, congressmen, to ask them to work for peace and to reject war always." This apparently sets the stage for a huge row between Trump and the Pope, one of them warmongering and threatening war crimes against, admittedly, an enemy nation. The other one saying, hey, maybe war's not a great idea and we should find peace. I guess. Cut to Ceasefire Day. This is the first time we supposedly have a ceasefire with Iran. Now, obviously this didn't last very long. The negotiations are in progress. There's hope at this point that Trump is going to get us out of this stupid fucking war that he started. So the Pope holds a peace vigil. He asked the world to join him in, quote, this moment of delicate diplomacy with prayer. He also said, quote, enough of the idolatry of self and money. Enough of the display of power, enough of war. True strength is shown in serving life. Nobody. Absolutely nobody. Trump. Pope Leo is weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy. He talks about the fear of the Trump administration. He doesn't mention the fear of the Catholic Church and all the other Christian... Yeah, look, it totally makes sense. He touches on several things. First, weak on crime. I don't know what that means. Does he think the Vatican is overrun with criminals? Like, do they have a murder problem inside the Holy See? What does he want? Oh, fuck!
The Spanish Inquisition.
There's a lot to this tweet, and it's mostly just stream of consciousness, but he criticizes the Pope for meeting David Axelrod, one of Obama's former advisors, which only occurs to you to mention if your brain is absolutely turned to mush from social media. He also says it's good to attack Venezuela, which, if I recall, was not a military operation, but a law enforcement operation, so that's a weird word choice. He claims he was elected in a landslide. He didn't even win a majority of the votes. He also says Pope Leo believes that it was okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Put a pin in that one. We'll come back to it. So will some other people. Trump posts this Jesus AI slop picture. It's roundly criticized as blasphemy. And Trump offers the absolute lamest excuse. I did a full video on this last week. The link is in the description if you want more. We go into it in depth. How does Trump respond to the criticism?
Mr. President, did you post that picture of yourself depicted as Jesus Jesus Christ.
Well, it wasn't depiction. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support. And only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, how did they come up with that? It's supposed to be me as a doctor.
Now, it's been circulating that maybe a staffer told President Trump that the photo had been doctored, and he conflated that to mean it was a photo of him as a doctor. I don't really buy it. That just doesn't sound like the mistake that somebody who's already passed like 3 cognitive tests this year would possibly make.
But I'm the only one that took it. I got every single question right.
Anyway, the next day, the Iranian president claims the moral high ground here. Woof. Also that day, on a trip to Africa, the Pope offered some comments to the press. He says he has no fear neither of the Trump administration nor speaking out loudly of the message of the gospel, and goes on to say that he isn't a politician or a foreign policymaker, and further quotes, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Oh my God, there's more? Okay. Remember, there was that Turning Point USA event at the University of Georgia with Vice President J.D. Vance and Erica Kirk. And then nobody showed up. So Erica Kirk made up this story about security threats, even though the Secret Service had secured everything for the literal vice president. And she used that as an excuse to bail. So J.D. Vance had to sit on stage and get peppered with questions, taking L after L from college students who recognize him for the sniveling, weasel-faced rat fuck that he is. Well, anyway, J.D. Vance converted to Catholicism in 2019. When asked about the Trump-Pope beef at the TPUSA event, he said this.
I think it's very, very important for the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology.
You better go back to catechism, dipshit. Pope Leo tweets this warning, woe to those who manipulate religion, blah, 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 dragging that which is sacred into darkness and filth. Shots fired? Meanwhile, Trump insists he's not fighting with the Pope.
I'm not fighting with him. The Pope made a statement. He says Iran can have a nuclear weapon. I say Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And if the Pope looked at the 42,000 people that were killed over the last 2 or 3 months as a protester with no weapons, no nothing, I mean, you take a look at that. So I can disagree with the Pope. I have a right to disagree. I have a right to disagree with the Pope.
So the Pope then also downplays that there's a conflict between him and Trump, and J.D. Vance responds like this. Pope Leo preaches the gospel, as he should. You got that? 2,000-year-old political and religious institution? J.D. Vance, who's been a Catholic for 7 years, gives you 2 thumbs up for preaching the gospel as you should. Well done in the eyes of God, Trump, and J.D. fucking Vance. Apparently tonight, as I'm recording this, Donald Trump is scheduled to read a prayer from the Oval Office as he scrambles to appease evangelicals who think maybe his beef with the foremost Christian on earth is a blasphemous look. What verse is he going to read? 2 Chronicles 7, verses 11 through 22. Notably, this includes verse 14.
If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land.
Now, I don't know if that means anything to you, but it might mean something to the January 6 rioters, because according to CNN, that same verse was prayed over them. Jesus. And here comes Sean Hannity, spiritual advisor to everybody.
Now, I do want to shift gears with a message to the Vatican tonight, specifically to Pope Leo. As of today, I no longer consider myself a Catholic, and while I am a Christian, I left the Catholic Church in large part because of institutionalized corruption, and it was at the parish level, to the bishop level, cardinals, all the way to Rome. You know, where are the pointed words for Iran, this evil regime, the #1 state sponsor of terror, the people that murdered 45,000 innocent protesters? Not a peep from Pope Leo. Ultimately, preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon is both moral and logical, and it could save potentially millions of lives. And we won't burden our children and grandchildren with a nuclear-armed terrorist state. Now, sadly, the same cannot be said for the leadership today of the Catholic Church.
So, where were those pointed words for Iran? Well, here's some. And sure, those condemn Iran, but that's all after Midnight Hammer. Remember that bit about how the Pope doesn't condemn Iran for pursuing nukes?
Ultimately, preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon is both moral and logical, and it could save potentially millions of lives. And we won't burden our children and grandchildren with a nuclear-armed terrorist state. Now, sadly, the same cannot be said for the leadership today of the Catholic Church.
And here's the tweet. Huh. Kind of seems like he's just picking Trump over his own religion. Now, let's talk a little bit about that. So, a lot of non-Catholics misunderstand the role of the Pope. Now, he is the leader of the church, and Catholicism has a dogma.
Back in the old days with JC, we used to walk everywhere. Did you ever have a fat apostle?
A dogma.
Why are we here?
A dogma of
I don't believe in voodoo. Voodoo. But I do believe in this.
Of papal infallibility, which means the Pope is infallible when he speaks on the doctrines of the Church, on the theology of Catholicism. He's only infallible on that subject. So if the Pope says war is bad, or Donald Trump's a moron, or J.D. Vance fucked his couch, he may be wrong. Catholics are allowed to disagree with him. If he says the Bible condones slavery, and that so long as it is practiced in accordance with the Old Testament, it is morally correct, and that the Church must teach this dogma, he is irrefutably correct. If a Catholic disagrees, they're a heretic. Now, understandably, popes don't do this very often. Notably, the Pope quoting scripture or making a theological argument in a sermon does not mean he's speaking ex cathedra, that is, on behalf of the entire church. In those regards, he's just a priest, fallible as anyone else, but, with a dope hat. So, Sean Hannity is the worst kind of bloviating, virtue-signaling, performative Catholic, because nothing the Pope says impacts him at all. His comments aren't doctrines of faith, they're simply one man's opinion. The Catholic teachings about God have not changed, and yet Hannity is abandoning his Christian beliefs for a political stunt in service of a man he worships as an idol. I think there's something in the Bible about that, but I can't remember.
What's the next one?
Do not make any idols.
In the ancient world, an idol was usually a small statue that people treated like a god. So, God said,
"Stop worshiping idols."
According to Pew Research, 20% of Americans are Catholic, and Trump generally polls really well with evangelicals, who are not Catholics. But lots of vocal conservatives are criticizing this whole stunt as blasphemy, or predicting it'll hurt Trump politically. They're all lying. It's all virtue signaling and performative outrage. To the degree anyone is genuinely mad about this, they'll forget it or just swallow it by midterms. Politically motivated faith and faith-motivated politics is all a smokescreen, because those are the easiest values to compromise. There's a reason the conservatives who hate gays flood Grindr at CPAC, who love thy neighbor hate Democrats, who care for the poor hate assistance programs, and who care for the sick hate Medicare and Medicaid. They're only Christians when they're virtue signaling to their in-group or aura-farming charity work. They're strict constitutional constructionists when they're obstructing a functioning liberal democratic republic, but not when it comes to the separation of church and state. They'll relentlessly attack some of our most vulnerable communities when they're coping with finishing 6th place in a swim meet, or condemning the murder of a citizen at the hands of the state.
They're intervening with ICE doing their jobs. That's why they're getting shot and killed, rightfully so. I defend ICE doing their jobs. Both of those deaths of whatever their names were could have been completely avoidable. Probably better off without him, regardless.
This Trump beef is just another flashpoint for conservatives. It's an excuse for them to pick another side. They're going to wear their Christianity on their sleeve. They're going to talk big, but they're going to invite him to then pray from the Oval Office. This is a joke. None of this is serious. It's blasphemous, but it's not serious.
Attack and dethrone God. Attack and dethrone God.
Attack and dethrone God.
Hey, if you like what I do here and want to support independent media, click like and subscribe, or maybe drop a comment down below to help the algorithm. It's super helpful to a brand new channel like mine and doesn't cost you a thing. You can check out more of my videos about games, hobbies, and politics here on the Mundangerous Thoughts YouTube channel, or one of these videos that YouTube thinks you might like.